Sometimes a man crosses a line he can't step back from, and that's exactly what Gregory Walsh did to my family. If you've ever faced someone who tried to take what wasn't theirs, tell me your story in the comments. I reached Fort Collins late on Christmas Eve, still carrying the weight of the road in my shoulders. A quick stop at my son's house felt harmless enough before heading home. Music thumped from the front room when I stepped out of my truck, the kind of party noise that didn't match the message he'd sent earlier about wanting a quiet night. His phone went to voicemail. Another call met the same end. While deciding whether to knock or turn around, a strained voice floated down from upstairs. "Don't come up here." The words didn't sound like a request, more like something pushed out through clenched teeth. I headed for the steps, ignoring the crowd that barely noticed me passing through. Conversation and laughter blurred behind me as I climbed. At the top of the landing, my hand wrapped around the doorknob to his room. Solid resistance met the twist. A dull thud followed, then a muffled breath, sharp, uneven. He didn't answer when I said his name. Another scrape hit the floor. A figure stood at the end of the hallway. Gregory Walsh. Arms crossed, expression sour, like I'd just walked into a private meeting he wanted to keep sealed. "You're early," he said. "I called him. He didn't pick up. He's asleep. Long week for him. Let the boy rest. He just spoke to me. You misheard." Gregory closed the distance by a few steps. "We've got a full house tonight. Maybe head out and catch him tomorrow." No hostility in his tone, yet something cold flattened the exchange. My son never locked that door, never spoke through it like every breath cost him. A soft groan leaked through the gap under the frame. Barely audible, but enough to tighten something low in my chest. That doesn't sound like sleep slipped out before I could stop it. Gregory's jaw moved once slow, like he was choosing a mask. "He'll be fine. Go home, Jonathan." A couple from the party drifted past the hallway and called his name. Gregory glanced back at them, offering a polite nod, then turned again with a stare that made it clear he wanted me gone. The thud behind the door came again, shorter, weaker. I stepped back, not because he asked, but because standing there another second felt wrong. Something in that room needed distance to reveal itself. On the way down the stairs, his words repeated in my mind, but my son's voice buried beneath them held more weight. Nothing about that whisper matched a man resting after a long week. The slope behind their fence helped me blend into the greenbelt. From there, the second-floor window lined up just enough for a narrow view. A strip of curtain hung crooked, leaving a small gap. Through it, my son leaned against the far wall, shoulders slumped, wrists held together with a thin loop of nylon. No blood, no bruising I could make out, yet his posture carried a weight that didn't belong to a holiday night. A thrum of voices drifted from the lower floor. Gregory spoke first, firm and impatient. "Get him to sign tonight. No more delays." The other man answered, tone low and irritated. "We need his signature before January, otherwise the Loveland place is stuck. The deed transfer won't move if he keeps dragging his feet," Gregory muttered. Hearing them talk about my son as if he were a stalled formality scraped at something raw. A cold knot formed in my stomach. A short time ago I'd believed he was managing life on his own terms. Seeing him bound proved how wrong that assumption had been. My phone came out by instinct, thumb tapping the record icon. Their conversation carried enough for the mic to catch the words. The file timer climbed second by second. A breeze cut across the strip of field behind me. It wasn't harsh, but the prickling across my neck suggested the risk of being spotted wasn't small. A public transit bus rolled past on the main road, its engine rattling the stillness. The noise pushed Gregory's voice louder, almost annoyed that he had to raise it. His mother made this step easy, signed without a fuss, left us holding the mess later. I'm not letting him repeat her mistakes. That line worked on me like a jolt. His mother. Not my ex-wife, but Gregory's. A woman I'd never met but heard mentioned in passing. Tonight her name came with a bitterness that hinted at an old scheme gone wrong. My son shifted in the room. The curtain fluttered, giving a clearer angle. His chin touched his chest, breath uneven. Every part of me wanted to storm up the steps, tear that door from its hinges, and pull him out. Years of working emergency scenes had taught me to move with caution, though. Charging in while clueless about who else lurked around wasn't smart. Their voices carried again. "He's scared." "Push a little harder," the cousin said. "He'll sign." "He always breaks eventually," Gregory replied. Hearing that word breaks chilled me. The recording continued, but keeping my focus steady proved difficult. A stretch of field separated me from the backyard fence, and a single misstep could send gravel rolling. Leaning closer to the window gave me another glimpse. My son tried to adjust his hands, struggling to relieve pressure on his wrists. The sight of him working through that strain replayed an old memory. A younger version of him insisting he didn't need help after a football injury, pretending he could handle everything alone. He'd carried that habit into adulthood, hiding exhaustion behind politeness. The screen of my phone glowed in my palm when checking the length of the audio clip. That little square of light pulled up another flash of memory the night I sat beside him at UC Health, months earlier after he collapsed at work. A nurse named Marisa Grant had taken one look at him and remarked softly to me, "Everyone has a limit. He won't say it, but he's closer than he thinks." Her words struck harder now than they did then. A car slowed near the back alley headlights, sweeping the tree line. My breath hitched as I crouched a little lower. The recording kept going. Gregory rambled about settling documents and getting full control before he changes his mind. His cousin chimed in with something about notarizing a copy before morning. Their confidence revealed how long this plan had been brewing. Another glance through the slit in the curtain showed my son lifting his head. His chest rose fast, then stuttered. He murmured something I couldn't hear. A hand pressed to the wall helped him stay upright. The nylon binding didn't look tight enough to cut circulation, but it symbolized a different kind of hold, one he'd been under long before this night. Footsteps creaked from the lower level. Gregory's tone sharpened. "Bring the papers." "When now?" "He's signing before midnight." A folder snapped shut. Chairs scraped. The cousin asked, "What if he refuses?" Gregory answered without hesitation. "Then we remind him he doesn't have many options." A warmth crept into my chest, anger or fear, maybe both. The recording captured every word, but holding the phone steady required focus I struggled to maintain. Gravel shifted beneath my boot as I adjusted my stance. The tiny sound seemed louder than it should have. Their voices faded for a moment. A door swung, then thudded. The household gathered again near the staircase. One set of steps moved upward, steady, slow, almost ceremonial. A shadow passed across the window frame. Gregory climbed the stairs with a stack of documents tucked under his arm and a pen in hand. I stayed hidden in the greenbelt, watching him head toward the room where my son sat restrained, trying to decide what needed to happen next. The narrow path along the fence brought me closer to the back porch. Each step felt measured not because of fear, but because the situation demanded care. Edging along the siding, a stretch of cold wood met my shoulder. Staying pressed against it helped keep my balance as I reached the rear door. A faint shimmer caught my eye. The panel of glass beside the knob carried a thin fracture branching out, like something had struck it recently. Running a thumb along the line revealed loose grit. Someone had tried to force that door, not with skill, more with desperation. My son must have taken a swing at it earlier, hoping to break free. That thought sat heavy in my chest, heavier than I expected. Upstairs, Gregory's voice rose just enough to travel through the structure of the house. 3 minutes. That's all you get. Sign it and we'll let you rest. The tone matched a man settling a debt, not speaking to family. A rasp answered him. My son's voice thin and strained. Leave my dad alone. Hearing that line stopped me cold. The idea that he worried about my safety even while tied up forced a question I didn't want to face. Had my presence made him vulnerable to these people? Maybe Gregory viewed me as an obstacle that needed to be removed, and my son carried the fallout. My hand hovered over my phone. Calling the police right now could bring help fast, yet barging in might stop Gregory before he escalated further. Either choice carried risk. Years working emergency response had taught me you don't delay when someone's in danger, but this wasn't a burning building. This was more tangled, closer, personal. A scrape echoed from the porch. Someone stepped out. Gregory's cousin leaned against a post, flicked a lighter, and took a drag from his cigarette. His phone rang and he answered without hesitation. We're moving tonight. Yeah, the papers are ready. I've got the backup copy notarized. Filing before January 1st, like you said. He laughed softly, the kind of laugh people use when they think they've already won. A beam supported the porch roof wide enough for me to hide behind. My knees bent slightly as I slid into its shadow. The cousin paced as he smoked. If he doesn't sign, we'll handle it. He's worn down enough. Don't worry. A wave of guilt rolled up before I could stop it. Maybe my son hadn't wanted to tell me how tough things had gotten, because he assumed I had already carried enough from past years. Maybe he believed he needed to shield me instead of the other way around. Parents talk themselves into thinking their children grow stronger than they once were. That belief blinds you sometimes until it's nearly too late. Seconds stretched. The cousin stomped out the cigarette, muttered something about getting the envelope, and headed back through the door. The latch clicked. Only the sound of music from the front of the house drifted faintly through the winter air. A whisper from above cut through the noise, a choked plea, short, sharp, unmistakably my son. That sound ended any debate. Whatever plan I tried to form vanished. Instinct overtook caution, and tension braced every muscle in my body. The rear door stood a few feet away. The fractured glass caught the reflection of the porch light, making the crack look fresher than before. Fingers curled around the knob. The metal felt colder than the air, maybe because my hand trembled just enough to notice. Another muffled protest from upstairs pushed adrenaline into my limbs. Breathing through my nose steadied me. A small shift of weight brought my other hand to the deadbolt. A pulse beat at my throat as the bolt resisted for half a second. One more attempt, slow, deliberate, and the mechanism gave way. The sound was barely more than a soft snap, but in that moment it filled my ears. My thumb slid off the latch as it fell into its open position, and the door settled against the frame, like it had been waiting for someone to push through. That single click marked the point where hesitation ended. The back door gave way under my hand, and I slipped into the kitchen with my breath held low. Footsteps thudded overhead, Gregory pacing the hallway, papers brushing against each other every time he shifted his grip. The house carried every sound in a way that made my nerves tighten. Something about the rhythm of his steps suggested impatience, maybe anger, maybe both. Keeping close to the wall, I moved towards the narrow passage leading to the stairs. The counter held a line of dishes from the party, and my sleeve brushed one small bowl. It toppled, hitting the floor with a dull clatter that punched straight through the silence around me. My pulse jumped so hard my ribs ached. Another sound followed the back latch clicking. Gregory's cousin stepped in from the porch. His head swung from side to side as he scanned the kitchen. I pressed myself against the tall pantry cabinet, barely wedged behind the door. His shoes scraped across the tile, as he muttered something about drafts and loose hinges. A few more steps, and he stood close enough for me to smell cigarette smoke on his jacket. "Greg, something fell down here," he called out. Gregory barked from upstairs. "Check it, and lock that door. We don't need strangers walking in." The cousin twisted the deadbolt with a heavy snap. That sound sealed off my only easy escape. He hovered a second longer, shrugged, then trudged back toward the living room. His steps faded as the party noise swallowed them. Upstairs, another noise rose, furniture dragging, then my son's strained voice. "If I don't sign, what then?" Not fear, resignation. That tone scared me more than anything else tonight. Pressure closed around my ribs again. Every second slipping away felt like sand sliding through a funnel. Gregory thundered back, "Stop stalling." Fabric rustled. A muted thud suggested my son had been pulled from the wall. No cry followed, which somehow made it worse. Years of holding himself together taught him how to swallow pain without making a scene. That skill felt like a curse right now. My path back to the yard was sealed. The cousin's lock clicked home with a finality I couldn't ignore. Staying hidden no longer made sense. Waiting might cost my son more than a bruised wrist. A decision formed in me without ceremony, shaped by the years I'd watched emergencies spiral if action came too late. The staircase rose in front of me. The carpeted steps absorbed most of the sound as I moved up the first few. Muscles in my legs quivered from strain. Not age, not fear, just the surge of energy that comes when you realize everything depends on the next 5 minutes. Halfway up, I paused. The absurdity of the situation hit me. A 54-year-old man with nothing but a phone full of evidence and a body that had taken too many hits from work preparing to face 2 men younger and stronger. The hallway above trembled with movement. Papers rustled again. My son gasped softly and said something I couldn't make out. Gregory cut him off with a single sharp command sign. "I'm done asking." Hand on the banister, I steadied myself. The air in the stairwell felt tense enough to hold its own weight. A lifetime of training people to stay calm in a crisis didn't prepare me for the sound of my own son being cornered like this. A few more steps carried me to the landing. My breath came in a tight rhythm, but my resolve stayed anchored. Reaching the top of the stairs, I stretched my fingers toward the doorknob of my son's room. Before touching it, Gregory shouted again, louder, this time sign. "I'm not saying it again." The latch turned beneath my hand, and the door opened just far enough for me to step through. The room froze. Gregory stood with a stack of papers, his cousin near the dresser, and my son slumped against the wall with his wrists bound. A heavy stillness filled the space. Not anger, not shock, something in between, as if no one expected a witness at this stage. Gregory recovered first. "Jonathan," he said, holding his palms out like a man greeting an old friend, "you've misunderstood everything." Not a hint of shame touched his face. He spoke as though the nylon around my son's wrists didn't exist. "We're helping him settle financial responsibilities," he continued. "He's overwhelmed. You know how he gets." My jaw tightened. Arguments gathered in my throat, but I pushed them down and walked toward my son. His head lifted slightly. Color drained from his face, leaving him pale and exhausted. He didn't speak, but the rise of his chest stuttered in small, uneven movements. The moment my fingers reached for the nylon, Gregory slid between us, forcing space. "Hold on," he said sharply. "You barging in doesn't fix anything." A memory cut through me with sudden clarity, standing in another home decades ago, surrounded by my former in-laws, each one insisting they knew what was best, while papers piled on a table. That same powerless sensation dug into my ribs now. Different house, different year, same tactic. Someone stronger on the surface deciding another man should hand over control. The resentment brewing from those old years met the fear I felt tonight, but neither outweighed what needed doing. "He's going to the hospital" escaped my mouth before reasoning could second-guess it. Gregory's expression hardened. He snatched the paperwork from the bed, clutching it as if the pages held his last chance at authority. "You blow this up," he growled, "and he loses everything. The house, the accounts, all of it. You want that on you." His cousin shifted behind him and slid the lock on the door. The click echoed through the room in a way that made my stomach twist. We were shut in together now, no path back through the hall, no chance to bring help without fighting through both men first. A hacking cough came from my son. His shoulder scraped the wall as he tried to steady himself. He pushed up from the floor only to sway. I reached him before he collapsed fully. His weight sagged into my arms. My muscles clenched under the strain, not because he was heavy, but because the sight of him this weekend hit far deeper than any injury I'd ever treated on the job. "Easy," I murmured, lowering him enough to keep him stable. His breathing came ragged, each inhale shorter than the last. Gregory took a few steps forward. "Give me the phone, Jonathan," he demanded. "This isn't going anywhere if you keep recording your fantasy version of events." He lunged. I pulled my hand back instinctively. The tension in the room snapped, like a cord stretched too far. For a second, no one moved. His cousin stood by the door, guarding it with a stiffness that told me he wasn't sure how this would play out. Gregory advanced again. "You can't win this," he said, voice low, the charm gone. "You walk out, sign the papers, and this ends quietly, or you stay and we settle it the hard way." The threat didn't surprise me, but hearing it laid out so plainly pushed something dormant to the surface. Maybe stubbornness. Maybe the instinct every father feels when he sees his child cornered. My other hand drifted toward my pocket. I didn't reach for a weapon, there wasn't one. Only the phone. The same phone that held their conversations from the yard. Every lie, every plan, every careless comment they believed no one heard. My son coughed again, leaning heavily against my shoulder. That sound settled my thoughts. A line from an old mentor rang through my head. "When someone shows you their endgame, you don't negotiate. You document." The words weren't meant for a moment like this yet. They fit perfectly. Gregory reached for me one more time, fingers spread, as if ready to rip the device away. "Hand it over," he snapped. My thumb unlocked the screen instead. The audio file glowed, and a second later the recording of their voices filled the room. Gregory's threats, the cousin's comments about filing documents by January, mention of the Loveland property, all of it poured out loud enough that denial wasn't an option. Both men froze. Shock washed over the cousin's face first. Gregory's eyes narrowed, then widened, disbelief turning into something darker. He whispered, "You recorded all of that?" The question hung unfinished as the last seconds of the file played on. Gregory stiffened as his own voice filled the room from the phone's speaker. Every threat, every push to force a signature echoed with a clarity he couldn't outrun. His cousin shifted from foot to foot, nerves twisting his features. He darted forward as if to snatch the phone, but the volume was already turned up. The recording spilled out into the cramped space with no chance of being silenced quickly. My son raised his head. His breath rasped, yet he forced out a few words. He did this to his ex-wife, and to his sister. They left the state because of him. The cousin's face drained of color. Gregory snapped his focus to my son, fury breaking through his thin veneer. "That's not your place to say," he barked. The pretense dissolved. Whatever patient facade he'd kept collapsed into raw aggression. He lunged across the room, slamming his hand on my phone to stop the recording. The force knocked me backward into the edge of the mattress. Pain shot through my side, sharp enough to make my breath hitch. My son clutched at his chest, coughing hard, each spasm bending him forward. Sweat formed along his hairline. His breathing had shifted from strained to alarming. A cold realization settled over me. This wasn't only stress. Something deeper had been weakening him for a long time, and he'd tried to manage it alone. Gregory grabbed my arm and yanked me upright. "No one's going to believe your version," he snarled. He locked himself in. "You broke in. That's all anyone will hear." He shoved me again, and his cousin hovered uncertainly near the door. A thin film of panic coated the scene. Every instinct I had screamed to focus on my son to keep him from collapsing. Pressure built across my ribs where Gregory's shove landed. The old injury from years ago pulsed under my skin, but I forced that sensation away and reached toward the floor where my phone had slid. Fingers brushed the case just as Gregory swung his foot to block it. My son coughed again, a rough, tearing sound that pulled every thought into a narrow tunnel of urgency. Whatever Gregory wanted no longer mattered as much as getting my boy medical help. He slumped sideways, and I caught him under one arm before he crumpled. While supporting his weight, my other hand closed around the phone. Gregory noticed too late. "Give that here," he snapped, reaching for me. I pulled back, shifting just enough to keep the device out of reach. The cousin stumbled toward us, uncertain whether to intervene or retreat. He glanced at the window, then the hallway, his nerves unraveling. Gregory grabbed the paperwork and stormed toward the door. "We're done waiting," he shouted. "I'll take these and file them. We'll push the paperwork to the court before morning." He flung the door open and yelled down the staircase. "Get someone on the line. Tell them we're filing tonight." That was the moment I moved. Supporting my son's weakening frame, I guided him toward the stairs. His legs trembled beneath him. One hand clutched my shoulder, the other pressed against his sternum as he tried to steady his breath. We reached the top step just as Gregory barked into his phone. "Push the documents through before sunrise. I don't care what you have to do." His cousin peeked through the front curtains and froze. "Greg!" "Someone just pulled in," Gregory snapped, who the cousin swallowed hard. "Police." Every figure in the house stopped moving. No one spoke. No one breathed. The sound that broke the stillness came from my son, a shallow, fragile inhale that trembled through him as I held him upright. The front door opened, and 2 officers stepped across the threshold with steady, deliberate movements. Their presence shifted the energy of the entire house. The cousin's shoulders sank first. Gregory straightened, then forced a mild expression. One officer spoke firmly. "Everyone separate. We need space to talk to each of you." Gregory raised his hands as if offering calm. "We're dealing with a family misunderstanding," he said. "Nothing dangerous, just tension during the holidays." He gestured toward my son, who leaned heavily against me. The officer's gaze lingered on the nylon around his wrists. The second officer approached. "Sir, we'll take care of him. Hand him over and we'll assess his condition." My phone rested in my palm. No long speech felt necessary. "Check his wrists," I said. "And his oxygen. He's been restrained." The officer nodded. "Do you have evidence of how long he's been held?" The phone lifted toward him. "Recordings. Conversations from earlier. Everything's there." He accepted it without hesitation, already slipping an earpiece in to listen. 2 paramedics moved past me and started guiding my son toward the door. His steps faltered. His lips held a faint bluish cast. One paramedic turned to call for a stretcher. As they secured him, a familiar voice called from the ambulance parked in the driveway. Jonathan Marisa Grant approached with a clipboard tucked under her arm. The recognition in her eyes cut through the chaos. "Is he responsive?" she asked the paramedic. Then to me, softer. "How long was he held this time?" Her question wasn't loud, but Gregory heard it. He jerked his head toward her, indignation rising. "What do you mean, this time? He hasn't been held." Marissa ignored him and checked my son's pulse. That dismissal pierced Gregory's mask faster than any accusation. His jaw twitched, and a thin thread of panic unraveled behind his glare. The officer who'd taken my phone returned from the doorway. "Mr. Walsh, we need to review the documents you mentioned." Gregory forced a half smile. "Of course. Whatever helps clear this up." He followed them back toward the kitchen. The cousin trailed behind, rubbing the back of his neck. Another officer began inspecting the lower rooms. A minute later came a sharp call, "Over here." Camera logs. Footsteps converged near the pantry computer station. The officer scrolled through several feeds, then stopped abruptly. A short clip played Gregory shoving my son backward during the party setup, sending him into the corner of the counter. The timestamp marked the early evening, long before any supposed family dispute. The cousin whispered, "Greg, you said he tripped." "Shut up," Gregory snapped. The officer replayed the clip, then turned to Gregory. "This matches the audio we heard from the recording. Let's continue reviewing." Gregory's bravado cracked. "That footage is out of context," he protested. "He was unstable. You know how he is." The cousin folded under the pressure first. "He pushed him," he muttered. "And this isn't the first time." Gregory spun on him. "Don't start that." But the cousin kept talking, voice trembling. "He did the same stuff in Casper. His family left because of him." The room fell into a charged pause. Officers exchanged glances, the kind of look that meant a line had officially been crossed. Mr. Walsh, an officer, said, "Turn around. Hands behind your back." Gregory froze for half a beat, and then obeyed, though his breathing sharpened. The clink of handcuffs echoed off the cabinets. His cousin sagged against the wall, as if bracing for impact. "You're arresting the wrong person." Gregory insisted, his voice cracking around the edges. "This is a setup." The officer didn't bother responding. Another retrieved the stack of documents Gregory had tried to carry out. They bagged the evidence, secured the room, and noted the signs of forced restraint. Outside, the paramedics lifted my son into the ambulance. His chest rose in shallow, uneven breaths. Marissa signaled for me to follow. A bag of my son's belongings had been handed to me, his wallet, keys, phone. The weight of it grounded me more than anything that had happened inside the house. I climbed up beside the stretcher as the doors closed. Marissa adjusted the oxygen line and glanced at me. "He's going to need full evaluation," she said gently. "But you did the right thing bringing us in." Her reassurance didn't settle anything in my mind. The only thing I could think about was his hand twitching on the blanket, a small, involuntary movement that showed how hard he'd fought to keep himself together. The ambulance rolled away from the house. Police lights faded behind us. My son woke near dawn. The monitor beside him hummed as his eyes opened and tracked the room. He looked older than he had any right to, worn thin by weeks I hadn't seen. "Dad, are you mad at me?" he whispered. The question settled between us with a heaviness I didn't want to name. My coat came off, draped over the chair before I sat. "Let the doctor look at you first," was all I said. He didn't push for more. His shoulders loosened a fraction, as if permission to rest had finally been granted. Marissa stepped in with a tablet tucked under her arm. She checked his vitals, adjusted a line, then gestured for me to join her near the doorway. "He's dealing with prolonged sleep loss," she explained. "Severe stress and signs he's been pressured financially for months. We've flagged his chart for a social worker. You'll need to speak with the police again later today." Her tone carried no judgment, only clarity, the kind that comes from seeing too many people arrive at the same breaking point. "Will he bounce back?" I asked. "He can," she said. but he'll need distance from whoever's been controlling him. Behind us, my son dozed again, exhausted but stable. By mid-morning, a detective stopped by with updates. Gregory faced 3 charges: unlawful restraint assault and attempted financial exploitation. Wyoming authorities had contacted Larimer County about reopening an older case tied to his past behavior. The detective didn't elaborate, and I didn't need details to understand what it meant. Patterns repeat when no one stops them. No visitors came for Gregory. No family member called the hospital asking about my son. Their absence created a stark contrast against the chaos of the night before. Estrangement has a sound to it, not silence exactly, but a kind of refusal to acknowledge reality. I'd heard that sound once before in my younger years. I recognized it now. While my son slept, paperwork arrived from the police department. Temporary protections were needed. No contact orders, limits on asset access, notice of pending charges. Signing my name felt oddly grounding, each signature a step toward repairing something that should never have fractured this way. A clerk handed me another stack. "These revoke any authorizations he signed under pressure," she said. "You can file them today." Working through those documents brought an ache sharper than anything Gregory had tried to inflict. My biggest fear had always been failing to protect my boy, failing in the same ways I once watched play out in another family decades ago. That fear had shaped me more than I admitted. Tonight, though, it didn't shrink me. It pushed me forward. When every temporary order had been secured, I left the room to stretch my legs. The hallway outside the ICU glowed with early afternoon traffic staff, rolling beds, families murmuring about holiday schedules, doctors charting at mobile stations. Life kept going, indifferent to the storm we'd survived. My phone buzzed. A message from work. "Let us know when you're back from break. Schedule resets next week." For the first time in hours, something normal entered my orbit. Work routine. The pace I trusted it all waited where I'd left it. I responded simply that I'd confirm soon. Later that day, Marisa caught me near the vending machines. "We run a support group for families dealing with coercive control," she said. "Not formal counseling. More like a place to compare notes. You're welcome anytime." The offer landed softly, like someone laying a hand on your back to steady you. "I'll come," I told her. Not out of duty, but because the truth had finally settled in. You don't outrun patterns by pretending they're finished. Evening neared when the last round of hospital forms was completed. My son drifted in and out of sleep, his breathing steadier than it had been all morning. A nurse assured me they'd monitor him through the night. For now, there wasn't much left for me to do there. Outside, the lot held a thin layer of frost. I zipped my coat and crossed to my truck, the cold air cutting through the tension balled up between my shoulders. A path forward had begun to form back to work in a few days, morning workouts again, maybe a walk along the Poudre River Trail this weekend, just to clear the residue of everything that had unfolded. One last stop remained before I could head home. The police department sat a few blocks from the hospital. Its lobby held a handful of people filling out forms or waiting to speak with an officer. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, merging with the shuffle of paperwork behind the counter. A clerk at the front desk looked up. "You're here to finalize the statement?" I nodded. "Right this way." She led me toward an open door where a detective waited with a clipboard. The room was plain functional, no different from 100 others I'd walked through on job inspections over the years. Nothing symbolic about it, nothing dramatic, just another place where someone needed a signature to make the next step official. I took the pen he offered, reviewed the final page, and wrote my name. Then I handed the clipboard back and moved on to whatever waited outside that door.